So today I'm going to share with you the money habits that I've discovered after working with hundreds of millionaires throughout my career as a financial advisor. And trust me, the first one completely changed how I think about money. So look, I have sat across the table from people who've built serious wealth week in and week out. And I've noticed something, right? They weren't doing what most sort of money gurus will tell you to do. They weren't obsessing over lattes or clipping coupons. Instead, they seem to have these 5 specific habits that honestly, not that many people are talking about. So here's what we're going to be covering, right? We're going to be covering those 5 financial habits that actually separate millionaires from everybody else. We're going to be talking about why most people get them completely wrong and how you can start using them this week, even if you're starting from zero. So this first habit is gonna sound kind of crazy, right? But here's what blew my mind. Millionaires aren't scared of debt, like at all. Early in my career as an advisor, I continually made this classic mistake of thinking that all debt was evil, right? I remember speaking to my clients and telling them to pay off everything they had in terms of debts before investing. You know, it was the whole sort of debt-free is the way to be mentality. And honestly, it wasn't until I started working with my first millionaire clients that I realized that my approach was almost genuinely like completely backwards. I'll never forget this guy. So he had 3 mortgages, 2 business loans, and was literally borrowing money every single month. And my first thought at the time was like, this guy's going to go bankrupt. But then I looked at his net worth statement, right? And it kind of just like hit me like a truck. Every single loan that he had was making him money, right? The rental properties were paying more than the mortgage costs. The business loan had like doubled his company's revenue, and he was using leverage to build wealth faster than I'd ever seen at that point. And I think that insight kind of completely changed how I think about debt. And I now tell all of my clients, look, good debt pays you, bad debt costs you. And knowing the difference between those two changes absolutely everything when it comes to money. So what is good debt then, right? So essentially, in summary, it's money that you borrow to buy something that pays you back. So that could be, for example, something like a mortgage for a rental property that brings in, say, £800 per month, but the mortgage only costs you £600 per month. Or something like a business loan that lets you hire someone who brings in more money than they cost. And bad debt, right? That's borrowing for stuff that loses value or doesn't pay you anything, isn't cash flow positive. So, for example, like credit cards for holidays, car loans for fancy cars that you can rarely afford and people really don't care about, personal loans for shopping sprees, things like that, consumer debt. I love this approach because the maths is just pretty clear, to be honest with you. Now, it's not always as simple as this, obviously, but for example, if you borrow, £100,000 to buy a rental property that pays you, say, £800 every month, and after paying for mortgage and expenses, you net out 200 quid a month, well, that property is literally paying you to own it. Now, I think habit number 2 might literally be, again, the most underrated and misunderstood thing when it comes to just general finances. Now, most people will think of money as a sort of measure, a yardstick for their self-worth or their success. But what if I told you that it's actually it's a bit like a hammer in a toolbox. It's completely neutral until you decide what to build with it. And I know this sounds really stupid, but this isn't just semantics, right? It completely changes how you make financial decisions. When you see your money as being tied to your identity, it's completely understandable and completely natural to make emotional choices, right? You buy better things to feel better about yourself. You avoid investing, for instance, because losing money feels like a personal failure. And you stress about every financial decision because you feel like it kind of defines who you are. But when you recognize money is just a tool, like a hammer or a screwdriver, you begin asking yourself better questions. So instead of saying, what does this purchase say about me? You start asking to yourself, what job do I need this money to do? I cannot tell you how many clients I've seen transform their entire financial situation just by changing that one question. So instead of asking yourself, can I afford this? They start asking things like, is this the best use of my money right now to reach my goals? And I remember so clearly when this all became really obvious to me. So I had one client who was honestly just terrified to invest her money because market drops, they felt like personal attacks on her like intelligence. She'd done it before, the markets went down and she felt like she was stupid. But when she started seeing her investments as like a garden, right? Sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it rains, but over time, healthy plants grow. And she stopped checking her accounts daily and her stress just completely disappeared. This simple sort of reframing, right, of what money is actually for has helped more of my clients build wealth than any complex investment strategy that I've ever implemented for them. Now, you see, the millionaires that I've worked with over the years and have seen operate, right, they kind of get this sort of stuff instinctively. They don't get excited when they see their markets going up and their investments going up. And they don't get depressed when the markets go down, right? They just ask themselves this question: what does this situation allow me to do? So a market crash, right? It's time to buy more assets at lower prices. I've got a big bonus. Well, it's time to accelerate my wealth building plan. It's crazy. They treat money decisions like business decisions based on logic and long-term outcomes, not feelings. All right, habit number 3, they buy assets. They don't just seek out sort of trying to earn more. I think everyone kind of starts off thinking this way, right? So on the surface, focusing on increasing your salary seems like the right thing to do, right? It seems straightforward. Work harder, get promoted, earn more money, have more money, right? But beneath all of that is a reality that kind of changes everything, right? Income stops when you stop working, but assets keep paying even when you're asleep. So let me just show you quickly how powerful this whole thing is. So if you focus on salary, just increasing your salary, right? And let's say you get a £10,000 pay rise. Well, yeah, that's great. But that £10,000 extra per year, it only occurs while you're still actively working for money. But let's say you use that same energy to say buy £10,000 worth of, I don't know, dividend paying stocks yielding like 4%, the maths completely changes, right? That is £400 of annual income that continues whether you are actively working or not, plus potential growth on top of that as well. And every single millionaire that I've worked with completely understand this. They'll always say to me, hey, how can I turn my income into assets? How can I treat my income as starting to work for me rather than me working for it? So just to clarify, right, assets are just things that pay you regularly. So things like rental properties or stocks that grow or pay dividends or businesses that generate profit for you. Even, I don't know, websites that generate advertising money. Anything that produces a cash flow for you. And honestly, I think this different mindset is absolutely huge. Say you want an extra £1,000 a month. Well, okay, you could work overtime and stress yourself out, or you could work to build and buy an asset that will generate £1,000 a month passively. Sounds sort of overly simplistic, I understand that, but that's the key thing, is shifting from this income focus to buying assets that provide them a passive income. So habit number 4 is something that I've really tried to start implementing in my own life. They focus on the big wins. So I also call this the 80-20 rule. All right, so to illustrate this point, what I want you to do is meet, let's call them Sarah and Emma, okay? They're both working and earning £45,000 a year. And what they decided to do was get serious about their money. So Sarah chose to focus on those small expenses, right? So she started making coffee at home, switching to cheaper phone plans, using coupons, and tracking every single penny. Her reasoning was that the small amounts add up and that she felt productive managing all of those little details. Look after the pennies and the pounds will handle themselves. Emma, on the other hand, decided to focus on the big stuff, right? She negotiated her salary, moved to a cheaper area to cut her housing costs, and optimized her pension contribution. Now, let's roll forward 5 years. Where's Sarah at now? Well, she saved maybe 100 quid, 150 pounds a month through all of her small optimizations, but was still earning roughly the same salary and living in expensive housing. So Emma's reality, focusing on the big stuff, was that her salary negotiations had increased her income by £18,000 annually. The house moved saved her £4,800 a year, and her optimized pension was on track to be worth £200,000 more in retirement. And the difference here between the two, it wasn't luck or effort. It was just focusing on decisions that actually moved the needle rather than focusing on arbitrary small stuff. So what's the lesson here? Well, it's not that you shouldn't focus on the little things. Of course, every little helps, right? But your energy is limited. So try spending it on 20% of the financial decisions that create 80% of the results. It's called the Pareto distribution, okay? The single focus on just shifting to that has made a massive, massive difference when I've implemented it with clients. And again, every single wealthy millionaire client that I've spoken with, they just get it, right? They spend their time focusing on the big things that move the needle. So housing costs, career moves, big purchases, investment strategy. They don't waste all of the mental energy on avocado toast or daily coffees or Netflix subscriptions. Now, this habit number 5, I think is probably the biggest difference that I've seen between millionaires and people that are on their path to being millionaires and people that are going to stay stuck in the income generating mediocrity forever. They think in decades, not days. So what I want you to do is just take a second to imagine meeting your future self 30 years from now. They look you directly in the eyes and say, thank you. Thank you for understanding that every single financial decision that you made was really a decision about what kind of life I have. And thank you for choosing wisely. And look, that isn't science fiction, okay? It's exactly how millionaires think about money. Your future self is the recipient of every single choice you make today. When you invest £200, right, starting at age 30, you are sending approximately £400,000 to your 60-year-old self. Just think about that for a second. When you spend that £200 on stuff that you don't care about or that you're going to forget about, you're sending continued financial stress instead. Most people live like their future self is some stranger that they don't care about. They make decisions based on, how they feel today, not thinking about the person that they're going to become in 20, 30 years' time. And again, every single millionaire and wealthy client that I work with, they know and think in this way, okay? They always ask themselves, what will this decision look like in 20 years? What will it do for my future self? They buy quality items that last decades, right? They invest consistently through all the market ups and downs. They're building generational wealth, not just trying to get through the month. Now, again, I know that's easier said than done, but just shifting this mindset is absolutely critical. And it's one of the biggest habits that I see wealthy and successful people have. Just take a second to think, what would change if you made your financial decisions as if your future self were your most important person, most important client. They're waiting to thank you or maybe forgive you for what you decide to do today. Now, here is something that might actually frustrate you a little bit, okay? Everything I've just shared with you about these millionaire habits, they won't work unless you can actually stick to them, okay? Most people can't stick to them, which is why you need a consistent and repeatable system that grows your money on autopilot. Well, funnily enough, here's some good news. If you click on this video here, I'll take you through a simple yet unbelievably effective system that I've used for hundreds of my richest clients. So give it a click and I'll see you there.